Welcome back. Mr. Richard Akionla joins us next. He's a public affairs analyst. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
Well, about this, I mean, there's usually different perspectives about the operations of the NNPC, how certain things have been done previously, of which you had initially spoken of before. But about this particular report, I mean, what has changed? Why do you seem to have a change of heart about this recent 2018 financial audited report?
Well, that has been our cry over the years. I mean, and some of us have been major critics of the NNPC and the oil sector, that everything has been shrouded in secrecy, transparency and accountability. And I recall that when this new GMD came in, and I was one of the people that challenged him that, well, I hope you will make a difference because, I mean, all the things we have been seeing in the past, I mean, fell on deaf ears. So that I hope you throw open the accounts of NNPC because the previous GMDs, I mean, they go to the Senate, I mean, public hearings, that I mean, no audited account and the rest of it. So, and I threw that challenge. So, and interestingly, and I was pleasantly surprised that a year after that the GMD came out with an audited report for 2018, which I think was something that's quite commendable. And because, I mean, if some of us who have been, I mean, quite critical of the industry over the years, that for lack of accountability and transparency and something of this nature comes in. So I think it's only, I mean, reasonable for us to applaud that kind of initiative, which is quite commendable.
43 years after.
Yeah.
Are you comforted that it's coming up now?
Sorry? Oh, yes, sure. I mean, because for the first time, I mean, I'm pleasantly surprised because even when I gave that, when I challenged him a year ago, I didn't expect. I mean, I just felt, well, it's just one of those things that when the man promised, okay, he will do something. And I felt, well, it was just the usual talk. But for the first time for 3 years, I mean, that's something commendable, which is, I mean, I'm pleasantly surprised.
What do you hope that this report will achieve in the industry?
Well, it's engender public confidence in the industry, particularly in the NNPC, because, I mean, over the years, I mean, a number of us, many people have seen NNPC as bedrock, a cesspit of corruption. I mean, everything is shrouded in secrecy. But with this new auditor report, I mean, it will engender public confidence that, I mean, transparency and accountability is, I mean, uppermost in the agenda of the current the people in charge of the running of the NNPC.
But there are many who will still look at that and think, well, they're not exactly sure if that will achieve that particular purpose, because if they look at some of those particular details, I mean, yes, it's a huge report.
Yeah.
We can't even scratch the surface in just these few minutes. They think, look, there are more questions for us to answer. Functioning at this best capacity is not even being achieved at the moment.
Well, I think that'll be the starting point. Because the fact that this report is not now made public, that will even engender, I mean, a public discussion on this and dissect every aspect of the report. And from there, I mean, from the management and the oil sector in general and the government can learn from what has happened, where they have missed it, and how they can project in the future. So I think it's even good that it will be a matter of public discussion.
So you don't think this can backfire in terms of the appropriate figures, whether or not things add up by the time they have a forensic, if they actually dissect those things, it won't backfire on the commission? You think they'll just learn from this and then...
No, of course, I don't think it will backfire. I think because this is 2018 report, there's going to be 2019 reports and subsequent, I mean, 2020 reports. So I think they will learn from this, because as I said, people are going to dissect the, I mean, huge report and look at the, I mean, the gaps, the lapses, and see how, because this is a national asset. I mean, so we can't just, that's why when people talk about in the past that NNPC should be privatized and so that, so I say, no, I don't subscribe to that. This is a national asset that has to be preserved.
Well, if that's the case, because if you look at some of the percentage distribution for November 2018 domestic crude utilization, the DSDP, direct purchase, I mean, was 92.5%, was still refining just about 7.5%. They say it's not even locally here. So these are huge gaps.
Yes, I think that's a major area which I'm not too comfortable with, particularly in terms of our refining capacity. And I think that's, I mean, because that's why if you can adopt the energy template, which is working, I think that'll be better, but than privatizing it. And the issue of the refinery is a major challenge because, and that's one thing I will, if I were to see the GMD, this is something I will tell him that, look, the issue of the refinery, I mean, it's a major challenge that has to, how we can effectively, because, I mean, Dangote is coming with his own refinery, I mean, so there's going to be competition. And of course, I mean, that will even put much pressure on the NNPC on how these refineries can start working. Because if they work in at optimal capacity, then the issue of this importation and I mean whatever will be less.
So do we need to keep spending this amount of money if those refineries are not functioning at full capacity? It's a lot of resources we're spending on those.
Yes, but what I don't understand is that because over the years, because a major challenge we had is that when we, particularly during the Jonathan government, we had how much was spent on turnaround maintenance, which is, I mean, that could even have built, new refinery in the first place. So I was wondering, why can't we even build new refineries instead of spending this kind of huge resources on turnaround maintenance? So these are some of the gaps we have seen in this on the reports, and which I think all of us will learn from this and how we can effectively, tackle this issue.
From your observation and exercise in the industry, activities in the industry, what do you think is the reason for us focusing on these unproductive ventures of this turnaround maintenance that is not productive?
I think it's corruption. Because we said it, I recall that when Desiani was Minister of Petroleum, there was a program in Transcorp where I was there and where we challenged her that, look, why should you spend this kind of money on turnaround maintenance and there's nothing to show for it? So I think, and of course that money could have built fresh refineries in the first place. So these are some of the new challenges that the new GMD had to face. That look, this issue of refineries that are not working, how do we proceed from here? Yes, it's good to have this financial report, but again, the issue of so that's why I reject the issue of privatization totally. This is a national asset.
So you don't even think that the Kaduna refinery that recorded zero revenue in that particular year under review should be privatized?
No,
it is.
I don't believe so. Because, okay, for example, look at I think the other companies under NNPC.
Subsidiaries.
The other subsidiaries that make profit. Based on this financial report, nobody ever thought that such would happen. So if this subsidiary could make profit, then why do we have to privatize?
No, I'm talking about this particular one. This one refinery that's recorded, according to the report, zero revenue.
Yeah.
And three other refineries, combined three refineries that recorded losses of $154 million or something like that. You don't think that we should do something? What do you think we should do about it?
I don't think so, because take for example...
So what should we do about them?
No, I think it's a matter of, fixing these refineries and make sure...
We've been talking about this for years, Mr. Kela.
Yes.
For years, for decades at that.
Yes.
And nothing has happened so far. So why should we keep spending money on it?
If you look at if you look at NEPA, for example, and how NEPA was privatized and sold to discos that they don't have the capacity to handle it, that's the challenge we have. So
but we have another example of the telecom sector that is working very well, even in the privatization. So
precisely, telecom work very well, but the case of NNPC, it's a different ballgame. It's a humongous.
Maybe not all of them. For instance, the 20 subsidiaries have their reports individually, no consolidated document. Is that something of significance?
Yes, because there are different entities anyway.
Okay.
So of course they will have their own different.
But there is an NNPC.
Yes.
Isn't that significant still?
It does. It is, but I think that because this is the first time we are seeing this kind of document, and we are discussing it, and of course, as I said, it's going to, provoke more discussion on this on how to move forward from this. Because if there was no document in the first place, we won't even be talking. We won't have this discussion. But the fact that this kind of thing has come up, which I think is commendable. But now, how do we proceed from here? We need to dissect this report. From different sectors on how do we move forward in terms of 2019 report and how these refineries can work.
But do you think that the NNPC will be ready for maybe if external people were to, look very deeply at this report, would they be ready for the answers they'll hear from critics, for instance?
Why not? I mean, that's the whole essence, because, I mean, if you make your reports public, I mean, of course, you expect people to, I mean, critically analyze.
I mean, you talked about corruption.
Yeah.
If it's so deep
Yeah.
in the commission, do you think if they actually put their spotlight on it, they really will want the public
Why not?
and international community to see that?
No, because I think the whole essence of having an audited report is for openness and transparency, and which has just been done. And when you put in your website and you put in the public domain for people to actually dissect the report, that's the whole essence of it, because you learn from your mistakes and how to project in the future.
Someone commented on Twitter, says about this report, says, good one, but on checking the 2018 annual financial statement for NNPC Retail Limited, pages 33 and 34, notes to revenue and expenses are missing. How do we assess the performance if those pages are missing?
Well, I mean, that's news to me, because I mean, I'm hearing that for the first time. But I think, I mean, the best people to assess that one will be the NSP themselves, because
and even in the 2017, I don't know if the person also said the same thing. 2017, the profits before tax and after tax, and 2018, it turns out that in 2017 they made more than they did in 2018. So you just wonder if it's that profitable.
Yeah, well, I think to me, when I look at the, for example, I think the 1.something trillion in terms of the margin of profits of the various subsidiaries, I thought, I mean, if I look at it vis-a-vis the report itself, I think that the issue of overhead, because when you look at where you have made losses, then you have to now sit back and say, well, perhaps, I mean, if there are areas in which you have to cut your overhead expenditures and see how you can, I mean, make some additional profit. Because, I mean, whether we like it or not, I mean, you still have to report to the president and say, well, what progress have you made in the past 1 year? And if you're not making progress, then, I mean, you have no business to be there. So I think that if there is a shortfall in terms of the profit, I mean, it behoves on them that, okay, we don't want a repeat performance of what happened, and we have to increase in terms of profitability.
Okay, we'll get some more response in just a moment, but I understand we need to get the views of Daniel Ogbeid. Remember, we had tried to reach, this is politics now. Okay, well, is it there now? Okay. I understand it's not set yet, so they're going to hold the primaries.
Would it be okay to task the CSOs in the sector about a critical review of this document?
I was going to suggest that, because one major gap in the administration of NNPC is that they overlook the roles of the CSOs, and that, I mean, over time the CSOs have, I mean, done lots of work in terms of the strategic industry, I mean, area. And if you can, that's one I would going to suggest to the GMD, if you can interface with the CSO, I mean, periodically, because you will look at, because the CSO have done so much work in this area. So if you interface with the CSO, I mean, on a periodic basis, I mean, a number of these gaps that you have just highlighted, I mean, will be addressed. No doubt about it.
So you're suggesting it will be a good idea to get forensic accountants to a table and let them have a heart-to-heart discussion about this report, so they can get true feedback from the professionals in that field.
Exactly, precisely.
And what, going forward, you mentioned some work that CSOs in this sector have done. How significant are the gaps that you have noticed from the work that the CSOs have done? How significant are those gaps that you have noticed in the sector?
The major challenge is one you mentioned earlier, that particularly on the issue of refineries. That when you look at how much we have expended on the refineries and how much, I mean, we are getting out of it, that how do we get out of this quagmire of every time you spend so much money on refineries and you don't get anything? So that's a major challenge, and there are some reports done by some CSO on how we can get this, get it done. But of course, when some of these things are sent to the previous administration, I mean, nothing, I mean, it just ends up there. But now that the new administration, I mean, feels, I mean, that, I mean, in terms of openness and transparency, now, okay, that's, I'm challenging the new GMD, okay, have an interface maybe on a periodic basis with the CSO, and then look at their own report, their own analysis of it, and see how we can
What kind of work have the CSOs done about the pipeline vandalization all over the place?
Well, I know there are different aspects of the CSOs, who specialize in that area, and particularly those in Niger Delta, which I'm not part of them. Okay. So, but I'm aware that some reports on that aspect, particularly on the issue of vandalization, and of course, we talk about the clean out and all the kind of things. There are some CSOs specialized in that area in Niger Delta. So,
is there anybody doing anything about crude lifting, the exact volume of crude that is lifted and brought back into the country? Because they say, look, if you go through page 11 of that same document, the NNPC retail, it's not exactly clear the cost of the product, for instance.
I recall that when the CSO protested in 2011 on this fuel subsidy thing, the major, thrust of that protest was in corruption in the oil sector. And because of that, there was these two committees, I think it's around here, and then the Ribadu committee. And when the issue that's just raised now on the issue of this crude oil came in. So I think it is necessary to go back to those reports of Ribadu committee, because the Ribadu committee that reviewed the previous committee, and when this issue of crude oil came in. So I think it will be necessary for the current administration to look into that, to study that Ribadu report on that aspect.
Do you want to weigh in on
it was very detailed. The Ribadu report was quite detailed on that aspect.
You want to weigh in on the cost of producing a barrel here? Because currently the cost of producing a barrel of crude oil in the country is about $17, between $17 and $30, depending on the terrain of the company.
Well, I think that's a major challenge in terms of how to reduce the cost of production. That's a major challenge because, if you have to look at the other variables, how do we, vis-a-vis the imported oil and the rest of it. So I think it's a major challenge because, what I don't understand, quite frankly, is that if diesel has been deregulated over time, then how come that the similar thing is not happening to, even though it's happening gradually now, that's because, the cost is going down gradually. So why, if the cost of production is reduced substantially, and then again depending on what happens in international oil market. So I think these are some of the issues which we have to address in this, because as I said, it's a comprehensive thing that has to be done in terms of this report, not just in terms of the summary.
All right, well, it's really going to be very interesting, especially given the fact that the NNPC has said no more, what's that word now, on petrol, no more subsidy on petrol. Do you see that, being factored into all of this?
Have you accepted that in the first place that there isn't?
I think the reality the reality now is that the subsidy has to leave, has to go. That's related to me. That reality. Even though some also were so much opposed to it, but when you look at how much you spend every day on your subsidy, look at what has happened with this economic meltdown with COVID, and can Nigeria sustain it? That's a major challenge, because if we look at how diesel has been deregulated over the time, over the past couple of years, then we can't run away from removal of the subsidy now. Even though some of us were against it, but I think the reality has come to, stare in the face now. But what I think the oil sector, is, as I said, I'm glad that this kind of thing has happened, because it's going to engender so much of discussions, and because now you have put your account in the public domain. Which is a very good thing in terms of transparency and accountability. And I have to commend the GMD for that, and even the president, because I think the president gave me that charge when he appointed and inaugurated the new board, that we had to be very open and transparent, which I think one has to give that kudos to them for doing that.
All right, Mr. Shakinla, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Okay.